Hi, I'm Rachael, Head of Consumer and Market Insights here in Google. Part of my job is to go and look at trends and uncover data and insights to figure out what makes advertising effective. There's no doubt the marketing landscape has shifted during COVID. And despite some really big setbacks, there are a number of brands doing really well, succeeding and in some cases, thriving. The question is, why? What are these brands doing that is making them so effective, and how are they thinking about planning for today and also for tomorrow? To find some answers to these questions, I've been privileged enough to speak to some of the most interesting and innovative people in the marketing and media industry. I wanted to understand their point of view in terms of what was the data that they're looking at, what are some of the insights they're finding, and what are some of the recommendations and considerations they're speaking to marketers about in the current context. The first person I thought who could help us is Paul Sinkinson. He's the General Manager of Analytic Partners here in Australia, and he's a leading voice in market mix modelling. Think media channel effectiveness and optimisation. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been following with a lot of interest some of the analysis that you've been doing pre-COVID, in the early stages and now. What are some of the latest insights that you're seeing?
It's interesting, right? I think, with a lot of change that's gone on, we've seen a lot of people saying, the world's completely changing, everything's completely different. I think it's a little bit more boring than that, to be honest. A lot of marketers have come back from the pandemic, so I think that it's more about how do we prepare for the future. Looking at a recession, how are we going to do that? So it's a reinforcement, I think, of what we've been saying to date. Experiment, learn, and get smarter.
Well, one of the things that I really love about the data that you guys have is the ability to do meta-analysis and create norms. I'd love to hear a little bit from you about the types of ROIs that you were seeing by channel before the pandemic and then as we came into the pandemic.
What we've seen historically is always a strong digital performance. You can kind of see here that if we benchmark everything to TV, which we need to just to get rid of the impact of profit, right? What that means is there's an opportunity, I think, to reallocate some investment across these channels. How that's changed is interesting though. So TV increased during lockdown, the digital channels increased. We saw search up, we saw display up, we saw social up, we saw it all kind of come through. Two that came down though were out of home. Yep. No surprises, but radio came down as well.
And is the underlying reasons that you're seeing video have such a high ROI throughout this pandemic? Is it a factor of cost? Is it a factor of increasing consumer engagement? What are some of the things that are driving those increases?
There's definitely some cost elements in there. We've seen TV overperform, so you're getting more than what you paid for. Obviously that's skewed more to say news and those sorts of shows, but we're seeing it up across the board. That means that a higher performance, a lower cost, you're going to see strong ROIs, but we've started to see that come back to normal. In fact, a lot of the bonus stock is gone. On video, we're definitely seeing a lot more experimentation. So, there has been some cost drops there, definitely, but we're starting to see people just performing better. Across all of the screens, we're seeing more brand being done as a proportion. We'll spend a lot of that, price, a lot of that more opportunistic sort of media was cut. And so we're seeing brand building activity come through, and that really, really works.
Because there's a difference, isn't there, in the types of return on investment you get from a message that is a brand building type message and a message that is very much focused on promotions.
There's a more distinct difference than what we've ever seen. Okay. So brand has always overperformed versus price or product, more so in Australia. Australia kind of seems to be biased towards those short-term executions far more. So the proportion of advertising has always kind of been out of whack. Now, if you think of everything being on a yield curve, if you've got price and product kind of like up here at a flat point, it's not as efficient, right? And if you've got brand being underinvested, it's on a really steep part of the slope. It means you're getting this great ROI from it. So as it kind of recalibrates, and we're seeing that come through, but I think there's this emotional connection. It's a hark back to nicer times that's really helping brand lift its performance as well. Another area that brand works really well is when you're able to advertise more of your product. We always have a term that we call business size exposed, or BSE. So,
wait, business size exposed, BSE?
BSE. So what that means is the proportion of your business that your advertising touches. So if you're showing just a couple of products, it's just touching those products. If you're able to talk the entire portfolio of products, then you're getting closer to 100% of it. The bigger that is, the higher the ROI is going to be.
If you're a small brand though, and you've had budgets decrease significantly, how should you be thinking about media channels?
There definitely is a size effect. I'm a big believer in the more channels, the better. We've shown you guys often that as you add media channels to a campaign, the synergy helps you lift the ROI, and it just gets greater and greater and greater. But that's predicated on you getting incremental reach. So, you need that incremental reach from each channel. If you just spread it and you're not driving reach, obviously you're not going to get a great result. Once you get to around $1 million, it's fine. Have TV, have your digital video, have your out of home. We're going into an environment now, particularly around MPD launches. It's trickier to do that. And I think that really has been a tipping point historically within Australia, where we say, look, move to out of home, move to digital. Because otherwise you're in the situation where you can afford maybe say 3 weeks of TV, you do this massive spike, and that's the only time you're talking to your customers through the whole year. So sure, you don't get as much reach within those weeks from a lower campaign, but you're in there for more weeks.
Is there a thought around being really smart with your reach in the current environment?
I think that reach has always been the key for us, right? More reach drives more sales. And you see this, like nice linear trend going across. As you get more reach, you drive more sales. But frequency doesn't work that way. Frequency is the enemy of it, right? You need a certain amount of reinforcement to be able to get that. But if you think about it, it's kind of like building, and then it tips over and it really plateaus. And that means even though you're getting more reach at certain levels, it's coming with such a large amount of frequency that it actually starts to destroy your ROI. So it's that trade-off. And I think that's why we kind of see different channels adding a higher ROI, because you get to that point where you're getting maximum reach, but you don't have excess frequency. You switch to the next channel, you can get reach again on top of that without having the frequency. You can move to the next channel and be able to drive it. So I think it is looking across channels to drive reach without having frequency come in and ruin the party.
I would love your thinking around search. Where is that sitting in the mix? Where do you see that going?
We see a really wide difference. So if you don't have a fulfillment ability, it can be a mid ROI tactic at best. As soon as you're able to do something with that traffic, it really, really spikes. It'll be your number one ROI. The lower search, it's about where are you taking those people and what are you getting them to do. I think a lot of people kind of think about, just search and using that, rather than thinking actually where you put them is the most important thing. So as you make your website better, as you make the UX better, that also really vastly increases the ROI. But also, more expensive products, higher involvement products, where there's more emotional involvement in the purchase, that's definitely driven higher results as well.
So I've got more emotion, I'm more invested in it. And yet, even though I think of search as a direct response piece, I'm saying it's working really well where I need to drive consideration and brand building and engagement.
Exactly.
How do
and
I
think this is one where last click has sometimes poisoned the well, or not poisoned the well, probably that's a bit harsh, but it's confused the situation, because people will use search just to reach out, to investigate and to learn. When I was a small child and I really wanted a particular toy, and I had to wait for Christmas, but there's no way I wasn't going to investigate it, research about it, learn about it, be so focused on every TV ad that I saw, go to the toy shop and play with it and imagine what it was going to be like. And this is all building this emotional connection. You're kind of like feeding the soul of it. That's what people can be doing during search as well, as you're waiting for that purchase, as you're looking at it.
Paul had a ton of really interesting insights, and I hope you found that as interesting as I did. The concept of media synergies, the idea that you should bring media channels together to get a more effective mix, is something that is a little bit of a hot topic. And that's the next person I wanted to speak to, Mark Ritson. And he's talked about this as the and, not the or, in a recent concept called bothism. Mark, by the way, this is not my house.
Gathered that. It looks very Google in the background.
Yeah, it's like much nicer than my house, so.
Much cleaner, yes.
I'm going to kick off with just a really simple one. I've been chatting with Paul Sinkinson, who we both know from Analytic Partners.
Yeah.
And he's been doing some really interesting work around media synergies and the idea that having more of a multi-channel mix delivers a higher ROI. I know this is something that you've been talking to as well. I've seen the recent article on bothism. Would love to hear your thoughts around that as well.
These days, we're kind of always beating up each other's ideas. My idea is superior to yours. Marketing science says that's true, that's not true. And I was just talking about how, from a bothist point of view, which we just made up, actually argument A and argument B, even though they're contradictory, often work best when combined together. And if you apply that, in this case, you can do it to the long and short, for example, to marketing and sales, but you can also apply it to the individual media and channels in your mix. And I think we've forgotten this over the last 10 or 15 years. We talk about the marketing mix and the media mix, but there ain't much of a mix anymore. Actually, combining things together, diversity and integration, if you will always give you a better result than applying a more secular approach and saying, look, just this one tool only. And the formula I've always used for it is A multiplied by B is always greater than 2A or 2B. The thing that Paul's work is, I'm full of, shit, as you know. I make most of this up.
I would never have said that, Mark.
The thing that makes Paul good is Paul actually has A, the data, B, the time, and C, the company in Analytic Partners to actually prove some of my shit is actually true, right? If you take any specific channel, whether it be TV, radio, search, and you slice, let's say, 10 or 20% of that budget off and put it into something else, we see a considerable increase in ROI as those extra channels are added without the budget going up.
If we're thinking about the different age groups and the different tactics that you need to use for each, how does that play out in the realm of video?
I think we should first pause. That's an excellent question. And you need to enjoy my Tasmanian dog who's posing for you in completely perfect fashion. That's Asia doing her best TV face. I think we're becoming more and more aware of a demographic gap that emerges in that sub-40, sub-35-year-old downwards group, whereby you're not going to be able to reach with that same level of power or frequency that group with traditional TV advertising that we once did not so long ago. There is a need, I think, now to regard the power of digital video as a proper alternative / substitute / complement to the traditional TV approach, because frankly we're just not getting enough TV reach for that younger group. So I do think there is a period coming where brands will need to complement their traditional TV approach with digital video. If you look at the long and the short of it, you're also not just dividing long and short, you're also dividing tofu and bofu, top of funnel and bottom of funnel. In my opinion, when you go long, top of funnel, you're also going to go mass. Ehrenberg Bass are right. You should target everyone and go for sophisticated mass marketing with emotional brand appeal. When you go short, you go usually bottom of funnel, you go with more product-based stuff, and you should go targeted in those cases. Generally speaking, in the past, we've said so-called traditional media are better suited to the long of it, the emotional, the mass. And then when you look at the bottom of the funnel, we've tended to see the more digital derived tools to be more superior in that bottom of funnel ROI targeted conversion. Now again, there's blurring there, not always. For example, if you went for a very young switched on digital market, you should be using digital top of funnel too. And you can use direct TV for bottom of funnel. So it's not black and white. The one exception to that, based on the data that I've seen, is this digital video opportunity, which has both the ability to do bottom of funnel targeted activation, performance marketing stuff quite well, and also almost in equal doses has the ability, again maybe for certain demos over others, to be a top of funnel standard broadcast emotional brand building media.
What role specifically do you see YouTube playing?
You're in a nice position with YouTube in the sense that, on one side we have traditional TV, which will still be there, but which will struggle a little with the reach towards that younger demo. And then on the other side, you've got SVOD, which by definition, and for the foreseeable future, is not going to take on any form of advertising in their revenue model. And then that puts you in that interesting position where, well, what's in the middle, really? Facebook remains a surprisingly potent medium. It still delivers extraordinarily good returns for many brands. Video is its weak point, in my opinion. And then you've got YouTube, which, has a little bit of a subscription play there for those that can afford it. but generally speaking, I think has an opportunity then to do things creatively with media and with advertising that we haven't seen before. Knowing when someone has seen a particular ad, so you can play ad 2 and ad 3 and ad 4, for example, is something that really hasn't been properly possible in the TV world.
There's been a lot written around how do you grow share of voice in type of a recessionary environment. Would love to hear your thoughts on this, a simple explanation kind of what it is and the importance of that.
The point I would make, and you're not paying me to say this, in fact, you're not paying me anything, actually.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I'm just going to point that out. There's a peculiar relationship between your share of market and your share of voice. A brand with a 15% share of market inevitably in most categories has about a 15% share of voice. And excess share of voice just refers to brands that decide, I want to increase my share of market, therefore I'm going to increase my share of voice. So here I am with 15% share of market. I need to have a 25% share of voice, and that excess will translate into growth, which it does. A plus 10 excess share of voice like that will probably deliver almost a percentage point of market share growth, all other things being equal, and there's a few other variables to throw in. I see it as a very good sanity test for marketing directors who want to grow, but you look at their share of voice or excess share of voice and they're clearly not investing enough in order to achieve that. The downside of share of voice, however, is it's very hard to calculate.
At Google, you should be looking carefully now at this idea of share of search. And that's the idea that if you imagine share of voice is at the top here, and then what we're trying to say is, and that eventually funnels down to growing market share. In most, I would argue almost all categories, underneath share of voice, share of search would give us a good indication of salience, of activity, and might actually be even more accurate than share of voice, and certainly from a Google point of view, easier to calculate.
After that conversation with Mark, there was really one other person that I had to go and talk to, and that's Les Binet. Now, Les has been researching marketing theories and effectiveness for decades, and he has some great theories right now on what marketers should be thinking about and how they should drive effectiveness. Rapid fire question. You're a CMO right now. What should you be doing? And what types of channels should you be investing in?
To deal with the situation right now, you need to think about how demand and supply are doing for your business in order to work out how to tweak that brand and activation mix.
You talk about the 60-40, it's a really well-known concept, and I think a lot of people mistakenly think about it as a media channel planning tool, where they're like, I need to spend 60% in traditional media and 40% in digital media. And that's not really the intent of what this is supposed to be.
Different media have different strengths, and some media are easier to use for brand building than others, and some media are easier to use for activation than others. So brand building is activity that is intended to change people's long-term mental associations and feelings about a brand and people's long-term preferences and habits. Activation is stuff that's tightly focused on getting an immediate behavioural response. And again, you can do that in any medium. Direct response TV is activation. Paid search is activation. So it's not a traditional digital thing. But typically, I would say smart marketing these days involves using the bulk of your budget typically devoted to brand building, so that's your 60. I would use broad reach traditional media, like for example TV is still worth having in the mix, but supplemented with newer digital brand building. So for example, TV and online video is a really good mix. If you look at our John Lewis ads, which I think are the most effective and famous ads in Britain today, we use exactly that mix. We use TV and online video to give broad reach emotion at scale, and then supplement that with activation. And these days, digital activation is the way to go. Paid search is the digital activation medium. So, if I had three media to use, I would use probably TV, online video, and paid search.
What's holding marketers back? Why aren't they doing a lot of the things that that you're putting forward that are grounded in a lot of insight. So what's stopping them?
You're talking sort of generally over the last decade or so.
I think even more specifically in the current environment that we're in at the moment.
There is a long-term problem in marketing. Peter Field and I have constantly complained about short-termism in marketing. I think it's a recognised problem, short-termism in business and short-termism in marketing, which undermines effectiveness, and paradoxically, focusing on short-term gains actually erodes long-term profits. One of the problems that's unrecognised is it's about measurement to some extent. We have lots of new measurement tools as a result of the digital revolution, but they're mostly short-term measurement tools because that's what's easy to measure online. And what you measure affects what you do. We need to counterbalance that with more long-term metrics. Share of searches, by which I mean share of organic Google search queries, turns out to be a very useful metric for gauging a brand's strength in a way. When a brand has its share of Google searches above its share of market, it will typically tend to grow. And when its brand share of Google searches is below its share of market, it will typically tend to go into decline. I believe share of search can be used as a long-term metric, and that might counterbalance some of that short-termism and lead brands to start thinking about the long-term again. That's the long-term problem. The short-term problem is the COVID crisis, and of course, cash flow, is a harsh reality for many businesses. But there is one problem, I think, which is that I have encountered businesses which are healthy, have got good cash flow, where demand for their products and services is healthy, and yet they're still cutting budgets and cutting marketing and advertising spend. If you're a business with healthy demand and you can meet that demand, this is the buying opportunity of a lifetime. Smart businesses will be going, okay, now this is our opportunity to get high share of voice, gain market share, drive our competitors out of business.
The messy middle, which we're both across those, actually I found challenged my own thinking about the role that search could play as well, because from that research we saw that, even something like search can actually provide and influence your consideration set, which arguably takes it out of just the bottom of the funnel type of space.
So I was a big fan of that research, and there's one chart in it in particular which I really liked, where it showed how if you use all the digital marketing guns at your disposal, it showed the degree to which people stick with the brand that they liked before they started shopping online. It shows two things. One, it shows that digital marketing at that kind of bottom of the funnel, close to the point of purchase, can have an enormous effect in converting and changing people's brand preferences at the last minute. But also, it shows that there's still a chunk of demand that cannot be shifted in that last final furlong. What you do in terms of prepping people and in getting them to like the brand and want the brand long before they go shopping online, that has a really important part to play as well.
But this has been hugely helpful and insightful, and I greatly appreciate you spending the time and sharing some of your learnings and thoughts, so thank you. What would be the 3 things that you would tell a marketer right now they need to be thinking about?
I think the key is, once you've got a bit of brand creative that works, don't change it. I've said many times, we're able to work out how much ROI is driven by creative versus by the media placements. And for moving pictures, it's the largest part. But being able to pick what's great is very, very hard. It's a leap of faith. So if you've got one that does work, you don't want to get rid of it. I think that so many people are worried about wear out. The biggest problem that we see in Australia is wear in. It doesn't go in for long enough. I've evaluated over 50,000 pieces of creative. Then we've looked at to see, okay, was it the right decision economically to make some new creative and switch and wear that instead? Over 50,000 times, 14 of them it was.
Ads wear out much less and much slower than most marketers believe. And in some circumstances, ads can wear in. And a lot of marketers have been going, well, we have to make some ads during lockdown, but they have to be sort of conference call type ads. I think a lot of companies could just run their old ads.
An excellent piece that's not as good is still better than average.
So when you're thinking about media, what you need to do is to think about how to reach all the corners of your market. A typical combination that works for a mass market brand would be, say, to use TV in its broadest sense, including broadcaster video on demand, and online video to supplement that. And that way you get TV for older viewers and online video for younger viewers. So there's been this silly idea in marketing that it's kind of traditional or digital, that it's some kind of battle between the two. That's nonsense. Smart marketers use them all together.
If you take a campaign that keeps adding channels without spending more money, we see a considerable increase in ROI as those extra channels are added without the budget going up. Most marketers are not aware of it. They still don't get it. But the reality is, well, at least when it comes to channels, more is very much more.
So often, a creative campaign is a TVC that gets done, it's probably a 16, right? And then that's cut down to a 15, but it gets stopped there. That's all that gets designed. So, how does that get spoused as a social post or as a bit of out-of-home creative? It happens much later. So that link and that synergy between them is just kind of not there. The idea should be espoused across multiple media.
I still believe brand image differentiation plays an important role.
Brand building, what you do before people start shopping, is really, really important. And activation, what you do to people as they're shopping, is really, really important. And you need to do both.
There's no doubt it's been a tough time over the last few months, but it's also been very helpful to talk to Mark and Paul and Les and get their perspective that it's also a time of opportunity. How can you take advantage of high-performing channel ROIs? What synergies between your media channels will enable you to get more for less? And are you looking to capture excess share of voice right now where your competitors might be pulling back on their marketing spend? Don't just blindly plan your marketing mix based on traditional rules of thumb. The landscape is constantly evolving and we need to test and learn and experiment alongside it. Smart reach is really critical in both the short and long term. So think about, where are my consumers engaging and am I showing up where they are? Online video and search, clear winners right now. We're seeing consumers shift towards digital channels, and by adding them to your marketing mix, you can increase your ROI. Thank you for coming with me on this journey. I hope you found it as helpful as I have. It's been a pleasure talking to Mark and Paul and Les and getting some new thinking and new ideas. There's never a one-size-fits-all approach, so I hope you'll take time after this to really rethink your media mix.